Okay, there's the live notification. So I am currently going. Alright, well, I'm on my own this evening, but welcome to the Humane Mind Live, episode 119, Philo-Sophie's Choice. And found this really interesting tie-in this week, so I don't know if that was either by plan or just by an interesting coincidence, but as you can tell from the thumbnail, it's the poster, or one of the posters for Sophie's Choice. I guess I don't know if it's necessarily a classic film, but a well-known film because of the shocking reveal. Although it's, even without having seen the movie myself, I know of the big reveal, and the movie is quite old, so hopefully it's not. Well, spoiler warning for anybody who hasn't seen the movie and wanted to see the movie without knowing what. But even without having seen the movie, and without somebody spoiling it for me, it's obvious from the promotional material. All right. So spoiler warning in case anybody didn't know this already. But Sophie's Choice is a movie with Meryl Streep, where the big reveal, I mean, it's a melodrama, there's a whole bunch of stuff going on, but the main, the namesake of the story is that in a Nazi concentration camp, this lady was forced to choose between her two children. One was going to the labor camps, the other one was going to the gas chamber. And so she sent one of her children to their death. That was the choice she had to make of which one. Now, I've got the thumbnail with Trump in the place of Meryl Streep, and the choice between quarantine and the economy. And I'm looking at this situation right now, and it is, false dilemma is not quite an accurate, or not quite the accurate term. I mean, it is a false dilemma, but that doesn't seem to quite doesn't seem to be quite accurate concerning the current situation, because what Trump has been faced with for the past few weeks, and what the nation has been and what I guess worldwide has been faced with for the past month or two, is a choice between locking down the economy and opening it up, or so locking down the economy to prevent this further spread of the bug that's spreading the disease of COVID-19. I forget the name of the actual bug itself, but because COVID-19 is the disease you get from, but everybody's calling it COVID-19. It's from the Wuhan flu viral strain, but that's some other identifier that I can never remember. Anyway, so the main topic I want to talk about is, so usually with a false dilemma, you're presented with two options, as if those are the only two options, and there is a third. This is more of a false dilemma in that there isn't an actual choice that needs to be made. It's presented as if there's a choice between quarantine or the economy, and it's like, that's not even a choice. The only reason it's presented as a choice is because of false information that's been spread around, and a whole lot of fear-mongering. And so that's going to be the main topic, but I've also got and so this, all the rest of this is pretty much subcategories of the main topic. So, Bi-theNumbers, I spelled it, B-I as in binary, because, again, you're talking about the false choice. And then Byers-Club, but not with a U, as in these people are going to die. That's a reference to the Dallas Buyers Club, and in that, again, and hopefully this is not a spoiler warning, because this is the main setup for the film, is in the Dallas Buyers Club, the main character has AIDS and is going to die. That's the setup for the film. That's not the big reveal. That's not a spoiler. That's in the first 2 to 3 minutes of the movie, maybe first 5 minutes or whatever, but that's the big, hey, we're following this person who has AIDS. That's and it's what they did. and it's based on a real life event. So I'll be talking a bit about that. And then worst ice cream advertisement ever. That'll be pretty obvious once I show the clips for that. And then the main, I got a clip for the main namesake, and all the clips that I'll be playing are in the description. And then a little kind of happy note at the end, and it's a shout out, but it's a stupid shout out, because like most of my, like when I reference somebody else's channel or anything like that, they've got a bigger audience than me, so I don't know what the purpose of any of that is. It's like, oh hey, they've got 20,000 and I've got like 100 maybe if I'm lucky, and nobody watches these videos. But I'm still gonna keep making them, because this is, I like at least getting my thoughts recorded on these subject matters. And I do think that based on the evidence that keeps coming out, I have been right on this since like January or the first week of February, because I've been telling all my friends and family, I've been coming out on these streams and I've been saying the exact same things every time, and lo and behold, I was right back then. And I've been right this entire time. I've been consistent, and other people have been flipping around, swapping, oh well, now we're getting new information, and they change their stance, and I'm like, no, this is all BS. It is like the flu. I kept saying that since February. The death rates and all of that, I said there was the potential that it could mutate, and because it's like the flu as far as its impact on people's health and all that sort of things. It's not like the flu as in it's more contagious, so it's going to put more people, it's going to get more people sick than the regular flu would. So it's bad compared to not having any sickness whatsoever, but it's not catastrophic. It's just hey, it's a new bump in the road sort of thing. We've dealt with similar things with Zika virus and swine flu, bird flu, and all these other things. And like, yeah, they crop up and they're temporary things, and they slightly bump numbers and they're back. But I mean, bird flu and swine flu, those were flus, and we didn't shut down everything for them. And the numbers we're seeing right now are very similar to what we saw during the bird flu and swine flu epidemics. They didn't reach the pandemic as far as I know. They might have gone pandemic. I don't think so though. I'm pretty sure those were considered epidemics. But the increase in death percentages and all that sort of thing was very similar to the current crop of the COVID stuff that we're seeing right now. All right, and to illustrate that, I've got a couple of clips here from Louder with Crowder where he talks about these, and other people have talked about these. These were just the clips that sprang to mind, or these were the first clips that I saw regarding this, and I was like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna, tag that and present that in the show. Other people have since come out and given the exact same figures and talked about the same stuff. So, all right.
It's important, okay? This is how it kind of started. Last night I was looking at going like, well, people who have the flu must be compromised.
Right.
So how many people are dying just from the flu? And I noticed, we can have this overlay right here, this is the CDC image, that flu deaths and pneumonia, they've gone down to effectively 0.
Yeah, so that's something I don't think I've covered on this show, and this was the first time I heard it, was on this show from Crowder, and this was on April 10th. I had known that they were taking any death where they presumed it could have been COVID and labeling as a COVID death. So by doing so, anybody who came in and they were sick and they had regular flu or cold-like symptoms, they marked it as a COVID. But that meant that anybody who actually died of the regular flu or common cold, other COVID strands, other than the current one that's being highlighted, those got swept under the COVID rug. And so then the numbers for those other conditions, which we see pretty consistent numbers on a regular basis, we can track that. We've got data for like a decade or more on this sort of thing, where we've got numbers that are pretty consistent. They kind of spiked up a little bit in 2017, but every other year other than that, they've been pretty stable, with like an expected number of deaths for all of these things. And right now, those numbers are 0 because everything's being given over to COVID to inflate the COVID numbers. And you're like, well, what is the difference between the number of COVID and the number, again, I still don't have a firm number on that and haven't heard anybody reporting and haven't seen any sources giving what is the difference between the expected number of normal deaths and how many more are we seeing due to COVID. That would be a very relevant number to have, because that's what the impact that COVID is doing on top of what we would regularly expect to see. But this is highlighting that point by saying, well, the number of flu deaths is and cold deaths from colds is 0 right now. Nobody's being reported as dying of the flu or pneumonia and other symptoms and things that may not be related to COVID at all. That should point to, hey, something's not right here.
Oh, that's weird.
When I checked in at the CDC.
Historically, decades,
yes.
No one's getting the flu this year?
Right.
Wow.
None.
Huh.
Now, here's the thing. I wanted
Very
to
strange.
assume, as usual, that I'm wrong, but Reg, our researcher, is very smart. So I looked, I'm like, well, 0. I said, okay, well, maybe what's happening is just, well, no, that doesn't make sense, because more people would be tested for the flu going in, right? If they're being tested for
Yeah,
COVID, you would
right.
think more people are being tested, maybe because of the social distancing.
Can I
fewer-
pause you real quick?
Yeah.
More people are being tested for the flu. Because most people who are going in for COVID testing aren't actually getting tested for COVID because they're reserving the test for the people who are higher risk or
Right.
showing severe symptoms, but they have enough flu tests, so all of those people are being tested for the flu. So
Right.
yes,
Yeah.
100% we are
Right.
doing more flu tests.
Right. So the flu death rate is very low. We're testing for the
Right.
flu. Well, okay, so you just cut me off at the pass, because I was playing devil's advocate with myself, but my actual advocate.
Yes.
Okay,
Good
no
job.
flu deaths. That's weird. Same thing with pneumonia. I said maybe fewer people are getting tested. No,
Yeah.
more people are getting tested. And keep in mind, too, also 7 to 15% of all flu deaths every year are some form of coronavirus. Not this novel coronavirus, but some form of coronavirus. That's why your Lysol and your
Right. Yeah.
mat
They
cleaner
say it.
Right.
says, hey, it kills coronavirus. We've had 17,000 deaths recorded from coronavirus. Okay? So what this is telling us right now is that all of those flu deaths, all of those pneumonia deaths, right? They're all being counted as coronavirus. So that's
Right.
important to know.
Everything's kind of being lumped
Everything
together.
is being counted as coronavirus,
Yeah.
even if they have these other conditions. And I thought, well, okay, that's not really fair, because that's not the standard that we use in measuring deaths for anything else. For example, if someone has the flu and they also are undergoing chemo treatment,
Right.
we
Right, yeah.
count cancer as the leading cause of death. So right away, that's tipping the numbers a little bit, but then it gets worse. Here's what I went to the CDC website after I saw that chart, and the flu death thing is weird. This is how they're counting deaths. A lot of people are saying, well, they're counting deaths, almost everything. They want to be liberal, as that's Hans Burks just said. This is from the CDC. Bring this up too, cute Maddie. Your people will think I'm lying. In cases where a definite diagnosis of COVID-19 cannot be made, but it is suspected or likely, compelling within a reasonable degree of certainty, it is acceptable to report COVID-19 under death certificate as probable or presumed. In these instances, certifiers should use their best clinical judgment in determining if a COVID-19 infection was likely.
Yeah, so I'm going to go back a bit, because this other clip that he doesn't read right here, this to me is also, this is bizarre. This is not the standard procedure. If COVID-19 played a role in the death, this condition should be specified on the death certificate. But like he was saying, if you have cancer and you get the flu, the cause of death is not marked as the flu. The cause of death is marked as cancer, because that was what was killing you. The flu may have pushed you over the top, but anything at that point would have pushed you over the top. It wasn't the flu itself that caused it, it was the cancer. Same thing if you have AIDS or HIV, the death is not tallied up for necessarily the illness that killed you, but I guess maybe AIDS is kind of a little bit different scenario, because AIDS by itself is not lethal. But it's the everything can kill you at that point. So AIDS is marked, and then the cause of death is whatever ended up pushing you over, I think, for the most part for AIDS. So sorry if that was a bad example. But other conditions where if you are hospitalized, like with a serious condition like pancreatic cancer or cirrhosis of the liver, I guess I think that's actually a cancer, isn't it? Not a type of cancer, isn't cirrhosis of the liver a type of cancer? I'm not entirely sure. Now that I say it, I'm trying to think of something other than cancer, and all these things are coming back. It's like, well, is that cancer or cancer related? But let's say, okay, what's like kidney failure? If you had defective kidneys or whatever, or your kidneys failed on you, and well, then you get sick with the cold because you're in the emergency room and everybody's pantsing out the cold, but you die because your kidneys failed, and you had an infection on top of that, or a cold on top of that. The cause of death is still marked back to the kidney failure, because that's the primary cause of your death. It's not like if we labeled the flu or cold for every one of those deaths, then the cold and flu would have a higher death toll than most other and you're like, that doesn't quite make sense, because then everybody would be like, oh, I don't want to catch the cold because I might die. And it's like the cold is a cold, it's annoying, it's whatever, but you're not going to risk dying from the cold unless you have a serious condition on top of that. And that's what's being ignored for COVID, because they're putting out these COVID numbers, and you're like, but these people were on death's row already. These people were already old and feeble, but it keeps being classified up, not natural causes, not just, not just in their 80s or 90s or whatever, and no, that's being classified as COVID. If it played a role in any way, that's not typical. Like I said, the only other situation where I think that it is kind of split is in the case of AIDS, but case of old age, in the case of, car accidents, in the case of cancers, in the case of, other conditions, that's the primary factor that led to the person's death, not getting sick with a seasonal sickness. And the fact that they are tallying all these up as COVID means that they're inflating the death rate.
If a COVID-19 infection was like, hold on a second, not yes,
just
but
guess.
What? Yes, just guess.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. Not only are they lumping in, so all of a sudden, go look at the charts. Flu deaths, boom, nothing.
Right.
Pneumonia deaths, boom, nothing now. All COVID deaths. Not only are they all being registered as COVID-19 deaths, but doctors can also, there you go, that was a chart from earlier, the flu's dropping down. But they can also make a guess that, well, we assume that person died from COVID-19.
Right.
This is important for two reasons. Science is flawless. The scientific method is flawless. Human beings applying it are not. Do you not think for a second that some leftist activist who also happens to work in a hospital in New York is not going to take every single opportunity possible to try and label this a COVID-19 death if they are not?
All right, so I think he's made his point pretty clear there. I'm not going to play the full or the rest of the clip there, because I'm going to move on to the next clip, because this is something from today.
That would mean that the mortality rate for an average-aged or middle-aged or above middle-aged of average health American is 0.02%. 0.02%. And again, all lives lost matter, of course, but it seems right now this fundamentally changes how we view this disease. It seems like it's a disease, a virus that is far more communicable than the average flu, but potentially not all that much more deadly, particularly.
Yeah, so he's talking about right there, and this is something I did allude to. Yes, it spreads faster, it impacts more areas of the body than usual COVID or usual sicknesses, because I talked about it being manufactured. So in addition to the numbers that came out today, there's also, everybody's talking about the Wuhan facilities, where it used to be tinfoil hat that, oh, yeah, the Wuhan facilities were, and now it's like, yeah, the U.S. was funding those facilities, we knew they were working on these, a strand, if not this very strands very close to this, like, almost as if this is either an offshoot of one of the strands they were working at one of those facilities, or it was directly the one that they created at that facility. I'm of the impression, based on the other guy's video I played a couple weeks ago, the guy that was being interviewed by Stefan Monalou, that yeah, this is definitely man-made, and I'm not sure what people who keep saying, oh, it's not man-made and all of that sort of thing, they are reporting what information they're getting from the World Health Organization and from China. They're not going in and actually matching up the DNA sequence like that other guy was able to do. But these people who keep claiming, oh, it's not manufactured, they don't know. They're making a claim without proof, because the only way to tell if it was manufactured or not would be to have the records from those Wuhan facilities. There's 2 of them in Wuhan, and both of them were studying this. I believe they're under the same control as just 2 separate facilities. It's it's very bizarre that so all of this information is coming out and it's being corroborated. But so he was just talking about there. So we talked about people who are of average health, like people who aren't in critical condition or have severe conditions that are, that make everything, like, if you've got diabetes, or if you're dealing with what's that called, the respiratory thing, CPD, right? Is it CPD? Chronic no, I don't think it's CPD. What's the chronic respiratory? But yeah, so if you've got asthma or something along those lines, then you're at risk for a whole other slew of things, not just this. For everybody else, which is something like 80 to 85% of the U.S. population, maybe not accurate there, your chances of getting it, based on the data that came out this week and earlier today, is 0.02. And I've seen other people report that the highest it could possibly be is 0.25. And I'm like, and that's the highest it could be for everybody. That's regardless of age range and condition and all that stuff. Your chances of dying from COVID right now, based on the new studies, so the new studies that came out today were tests for the antibodies, were to see, have you had COVID, but you weren't tested for COVID. And based on the sample size and extrapolating that out to California and then to the entire U.S., the number of people potentially infected by this is 28 to 55 times higher than the number of people who have been tested. And the number of deaths from COVID, even with their inflated numbers, that remains stationary, but the number of people who have had it is either multiplied by 28 times or 55 times, which drops down the mortality rate of this. And even if it's 28%, or 28 times, if there's 28 times more people who have had this COVID infection, and the death rate remains, even with their inflated numbers, up to 17,000, even with that, we're seeing a death rate of this of 0.25%. Now, what Crowder did to get his 0.02 is he excluded people over the age of, I think, I forget what he said earlier in the video, but I wasn't going to play the full clip because I just wanted to get that 0.02. And you can watch the full clip to make sure I'm not taking him out of context, make sure he's not incorrect on this. I double-checked the math. This is accurate based on the information we got today. He went with the average age of 80. So if you discount the number of deaths from people over the age of 80 and just, 79 and 355 days and under, if you just count those deaths with the new numbers of projected people who have had it, and I can't remember if you use the 28 number or the 55 number, either way, you're going to get a number that is very, very small. And there's 0.0 something. Whether it's 0.02 or whether it's 0.04 or possibly 0.05 or whatever, that's if you're under the age of 80, that's your chance of dying from COVID. I mean, I don't know the exact numbers on your chance of getting struck by lightning or whatever, but I would assume it's kind of in the ballpark, or your chance of dying from a bee sting, or dying from testing a 9-volt battery, or dying from a spider bite. It's very, And it's probably not as low as those now that I'm thinking about it. The 9-volt battery, that's in the dozens, and spider bites is in the dozens. So this is in the thousands of people dying per year. So it's probably not the same as lightning. I'm trying to think of something comparable. But it's 0.02 is less than the death rate of the flu and the cold. Because on average, so here's the other bizarre thing, is we've had 17,000 deaths attributed to COVID this year. During this what was regularly the flu and cold season. On average in the U.S., we get somewhere between 30,000 and 60,000 people who die of the seasonal sicknesses that go around. So even by all the numbers or whatever, even with the inflated statistics and all that sort of thing, the number of deaths in the U.S. because of seasonal sickness is down to about 2/3 of what it would normally be. And you're like, wait, we're down on the total deaths that we would usually expect from seasonal sicknesses, and yet shut everything down because we can't risk people getting sick. And it was like, then why wasn't this implemented earlier? Why wasn't this I think it was 2017 when we saw close to 70,000, I think, or maybe it was 60,000, but it was a abnormally high year in 2017 of people dying from the flus and regular COVIDs, not this new COVID, and other things that cause a common cold that lead to pneumonia and stuff like that. 2017 was an abnormal year, but overall we're seeing 30 to 60,000 on a regular annual basis, and right now we're under that 30,000. We're on the low end of the spectrum. And, we need to shut it down for 6 to 8 months. What? Shut it all down. Are you out of your mind? Even with the current death rates, there's no reason to do that. You could open up everything today, and the death rates aren't going to skyrocket, even with the current numbers. Like the 17,000, I'm sorry for all the people who died, but in the U.S., when you normally see 30 to 60,000 that die during this same time period because of illnesses and sicknesses, it's the system we currently have is already set up prepared for that. What they weren't prepared for was the projected number of 2 million people. What they weren't prepared for was 200,000. What they are prepared for is 30 to 60,000, and we're under that. And yet, keep everything shut down and all that. This is all fear-mongering propaganda with the hope of driving the economy into the toilet, because we've had, for the past 2.5+ years, the best economies on record. I think maybe it's only been a year and a half where we've been breaking records, but I mean, for the last 2.5 years, the economy has been booming in the U.S. And over the last couple of months, we've lost all of that progress, and it's all over this fear-mongering nonsense. Yes, it has the potential to get more people sick. Oh well, you're going to miss a week or two of work, but then you're back at work and everything's... So we see a little bump in the road, not this 3-month stall that is projected to go on until August or September. Not this $2 trillion stimulus package that's going to do jack, because it's printed money. It's not money that we have. It's just sending checks in the mail. It's not actual domestic product. It's not tangible goods. It's inflation. That's all it is, and inflation washes out at the end. It only helps the first people who get it and immediately spend it. Anybody who saved it, anybody who used it to pay bills, anybody who kept on it, they saw nothing out of it. They're back to square one. Or in some cases, they're worse off because of that inflation, even though they're getting the same paychecks and all that sort of thing, their money doesn't go as far because everything's going to go up in price because of inflation. A $2 trillion inflation. This does not help. This hurts. And so over these things that have been passed, have just undone all of the good that was done over the past 3 years. And that's why they're sticking with this fear-mongering tactic. Because if you look at all the people who are spreading this stuff, it is all people on the left. It is CNN, it is MSNBC, it is Democrats that are all saying, oh, Trump didn't do enough and we're that. No, he did too much. Granted, I cannot blame him because in the situation he was in, he was hearing both sides of the argument and had to make the best decision that was available to him at the time, given the evidence he had. And he's in a position where, like me, I can go out on the limb and say, oh yeah, this is a man-made virus, and yes, this is not going to be worse than the flu. He's not in a situation where he can take that risk. If I say that, nobody's going to listen to me anyway. I've got, nobody listens to this channel, nobody watches that, so at the most, I'm like, oh, one extra person. Oh well. He has the potential. He was told that possibly 2 million people would die under his watch if he didn't do something. Now, when it comes to 2 million people dying versus, reducing that, less than 2 million people dying, what do you think you're going to do? If you have if you don't do anything, you could have 2 million deaths on your hands. Or you could do something and reduce that number. Which are you going to do? You're going to, this is something I'll talk a little bit later on, although not as in-depth as I would like to, but maybe eventually I'll talk to it more in-depth when I have somebody to talk about this. This is the trolley problem. So if you are familiar with the trolley problem, this is an exercise in philosophy, and it parallels Sophie's choice. So the trolley problem was presented, and the scenario is you're in a trolley. The brakes don't work, so it's going to keep on its track. On one track, there are 5 people, and they cannot move out of the way in time. So if you continue straight, the trolley is going to crash into and kill 5 people. But there is a switch that you can flip, in which case it will go down another track, and it will hit 1 person. What do you do? And this is a exercise in trying to balance is like, well, logically speaking, the most moral outcome when you're stuck with a choice like this would be to flip the switch and have the trolley plow into 1 person. Now, it's set up to be an impossible scenario where there is no good choice, but at least you can make the least bad choice. And that's what was presented to Donald Trump. But I say, when it comes to the trolley problem, there is no correct solution of the 1 person or the 5 people, because either way, it's going to be a bad choice. The correct solution is to sacrifice yourself. So if there is a switch on the track, you can put that switch halfway between. The trolley will not be able to go one way or the other, and it will flip off the rails, and you will die in the process. That is the correct solution. Now, that's, again, they try to set up the hypothetical so that way you can't do that and you have to take but morally, that's the correct solution. If you have a choice between killing 5 people or killing 1 person, the correct moral choice is to remove yourself from the situation. Like, if anybody is going to die, it's going to be me. And if you can make that decision, it's like, yeah. It's like, well, I could land this plane and it's possibly going to crash in the airport and kill those people, or I could land on this runway and possibly crash into another airplane. It's like, no. If you're given that choice, don't land the plane. Go fly over something that's where nobody is and crash the plane there. You're not going to survive. But if you're the only person who dies in a plane crash, that's the solution. I mean, this trolley problem is presented in a bunch of different ways. There's a whole bunch of different varieties of this. It's like, well, what if you know the 1 person and you don't know the 5? And presented in all of these different, like, oh, what would you do? It's to make you kind of grasp these moral questions. But I'm of the opinion that the trolley problem is inherently flawed. And it's granted, it's presenting a situation that, while unpractical, people find themselves in all the time where there is no good choice. And I talked about that on a previous stream, where you can't win, the catch-22, you can't win no matter what you do. That's what they're setting up, and I'm saying in some certain situations, that is a false dilemma, where you're given two choices and they're pretending, you're stuck between these two choices, and like, that's not how the real world works. In the real world, if you only look at two choices and you're saying, these are my only two options, then you're going to pick the worst what Trump ended up doing was picking the less devastating of the two options, because losing 2 million people would be absolutely, that would be more brutal than what we're currently experiencing with the economic downturn. But he chose the economic downturn because, yes, while that would still, people would die, but it would be less total deaths than the 2 million. So, but I'm telling you right now, that's because it was misframed as if those were only two options. You had to choose one or the other. The correct solution in this situation would be to do nothing, and that would probably torpedo Trump's career or something like that. But the nation would have gone on. Less people would have died overall than either of the choices he was given. And things would have gone on. And yes, he probably would have lost the upcoming election. Right now, they're pushing this and they're pushing this and pushing this to try to get a loss for Donald Trump. And and all of their efforts are backfiring. And Trump is now, because people are saying, he has given a choice between two evils and chose the lesser of two evils. That's what people are looking at the situation like now. And I say, if I didn't know what I know, I would kind of agree with them. But I know that there was a third option that he was either not aware of or was forced was forced by all of the peer pressure and media pressure and political pressure, was forced to act when he had the choice not to act at all. That was an option, and had that been the actual option that was chosen, 2 million people wouldn't have died, and also the economy wouldn't be collapsing, people wouldn't be out of their livelihoods. And yes, people would have died, but it would be a number very similar to what we saw during the swine flu and bird flu and all of that sort of thing. It would have been a very similar, increase in deaths compared to previous historical incidents of this sort of thing going around. But right now, we got deaths that are slightly less than that, and we've got an economy that is in the toilet, and people who are out of work, people who are starving and going to food banks, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but it is, the politicians and the media did a very good job of framing this to make it appear as if there was only two options. But there's a third option that would have been better for everybody all around. And no choice between the two needed to be made. All right. Okay, so moving on to the... All right. To the next thing I got queued up here. So this is FEE, the Foundation for Economic Education. And it's like I mentioned this previously because I know I talked about Seamus and stuff like that. He does the Freedom Tunes cartoon. But he also does a couple of clips for this channel. And this channel does more than just Seamus's cartoons. They do a couple different series, and this is one particular series where they analyze films and relate it to news events and stuff like that, or they dissect it from a libertarian or Austrian economist point of view.
I know it's a weird time right now. A lot of us have been stuck at home for a bit, some voluntarily, some not. And you can't check social media or turn on a TV without seeing something about a horrifying global pandemic. Whether you think quarantines and closures are an overreaction or not, I think everyone of every political persuasion can agree on at least one thing. Our government has not handled this COVID-19 thing very well. For weeks, doctors in the U.S. weren't allowed to test patients for the virus at all.
Yeah.
Then, the only tests available were from the CDC that took a week to get results. And many of those tests turned out to be faulty. Not only did FDA regulations prohibit private labs in the U.S. from developing their own tests, they barred unapproved tests that were already successfully...
Yeah, so I'm going to pause it right there. So the CDC's original test had a failure rate of 80%. That means only 20% were successfully identifying a positive result or a negative result. And that was going on for the first week or two of this, before the private sector was allowed in
use in other countries from being imported. The first major outbreak in Washington was discovered only after a Seattle lab decided to ignore the regulations and run their own tests in defiance of the FDA.
Yeah, and so right there, that private lab running the test, that was the first confirmed case, but there were multiple cases prior to that. But people were going off of that first confirmed as when it actually arrived in the U.S., and they kept using that as the timeline. That is absolutely idiotic, and they were using that to try to quarantine and like, oh, hey, I wasn't sick, and I wasn't in that area, after that first person was, and then people moved around after that and continued to spread this. So it was here earlier, and it could have been relatively easily contained had they made it had the people in charge gone on and say, hey, this is the first confirmed case, but this has been out there for several weeks or possibly months earlier. Stop traveling around to places you don't need to go. Cancel whatever your trips are if you have been in this area in the past month or two. Don't spread it around, and actually you may want to consider getting yourself tested and that sort of thing. So there's two things that could have been done. Not only could they have ignored it earlier, or the FDA and the CDC could have approved private testing earlier, but they're power-hungry control. They're the government. They don't want to prove that they're out, or if they allow somebody else to do it, then it's like, well, what's the point of you? Why do we have you around when somebody else can do your job better than you? So they had to take oh no, this is all us. So they could have stepped out of the way and let other people who are better than them and more people than just them take care of this and get the accurate results, so we would have had a result sooner, so we would have had identified cases sooner. That would have limited the spread. The other thing is the people could have ignored those mandates by the CDC and FDA. They could have been like, no, you guys are out of your mind. There's no way we're waiting on you guys as a sole proprietor to this. We're ignoring you. And they could have ignored it earlier, and then they would have identified somebody with it earlier. That would have limited the spread of this. Third thing they could have done is, and this is something this would not have cost them anything, is once they identify the person, be like, hey, we've known this has been out there. This is the only first identified case. If you were in this area in the past month, you are a potential spreader of this. Make sure you do take all necessary precautions to avoid spreading this, because at that point in time, people insisted that this was a deadly disease, and had people actually taken the proper precautions, then knowing that, hey, they could have caught it much earlier than the first identified case, there wouldn't be as much spread and there wouldn't have been as much hysteria over this. And once they realized the actual death rate of this was not as high as what they were expecting, they could have taken a more measured approach. So it's failure at those 3 points as far as I can tell.
Fortunately,
but then that's just me being Captain Hindsight. Although, as far as I can tell, I was saying similar things in February, so I don't feel like I'm Captain Hindsight. I feel like I'm just reiterating points that I was making in February, although maybe not. Maybe I wasn't making those exact points, but I've been on the situations like, yeah, this is nothing, but if you are potentially carrying this around, limit who you infect with it. If you are sick, like with a regular cold, and you know it, you don't go to work. You call in sick, so that way you don't show up to work with a snotty nose and all that sort. That's what the rational thing to do is. You wash your hands more. You make sure that you don't go out as much. And that's kind of the same thing. It's like, well, if you think you might have it and you realize, oh, it's got a 2-week incubation period, people would have taken more precautions earlier. But they're like, oh, no, it wasn't discovered until this point in time, so there's no way I could have had it. And meanwhile, they're going and spreading it all around, and that's how why it could not be contained as easily.
The government did eventually drop their prohibition on private labs developing their own tests, which are much faster and, work. But there were still a number of regulations imposed by the FDA and other agencies that stood in the way of rapid progress in fighting the disease, like prohibiting at-home testing and restricting companies like Tesla, Ford, and GM from producing and selling ventilators.
Yeah. Those companies had to reach out to the White House to get approval. And I've talked about this previously. If there wasn't the risk of legal ramifications, like being sued by the FDA or the EPA or CDC, or being sued by the government and all this sort of thing, companies would have seen this as a business opportunity and reacted almost immediately to it. But instead, they were like, hey, we want to do this, but we're waiting for approval, so that way it's not our balls in the vice should something happen. Like, should we start doing this, and then the government's like, hey, you can't do that. Well, then they'd be down the creek without a paddle, right? Or up the creek without a paddle? I think it's up the creek without a paddle. Although that doesn't quite make sense because rivers flow down. But anyway. Yeah. That's a weird idiom. Sorry. And there's also not really water that is usually referenced in that idiom. But yeah, they're like, hey, we don't want to put ourselves under the guillotine or the sword of Damocles. We want to make sure that if we do this, we're in the clear and we're not risking potential lawsuits or fines or whatever it is that the government might do later on. We want to make sure that if we do this, we have your go-ahead. So that's another area that's,
even though they'd offered to do so. These problems have come as a surprise to a lot of people in the US, but they really shouldn't. The FDA has a long history of slowing the progress of innovation in healthcare. And since you're probably stuck at home, instead of rewatching Outbreak or Contagion for the 13th time, I'd like to direct your attention to a much better movie on Netflix that actually addresses some of the underlying problems our country is facing right now. Dallas Byers-Club. Stick around for this short edition of Out of Frame. Dallas Byers-Club was released in 2013 and tells the mostly true story of Ron Woodruff, played by Matthew McConaughey. If you haven't seen it, go ahead and do that, then come back to this video.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I did. I was like, oh, I've never seen Dallas Byers-Club. I know it won some awards and all that sort of stuff, but I knew most of what I had heard about it was Jared Leto playing a transvestite, or transgender, I'm not sure. That was never quite clear in the movie, but there's like all these people talking about, oh, it's so impressive, and I guess he won awards for that, and I was like, I watched the film, and I'm like, his performance was forgettable. I don't know why he got any awards. I do know why, but based on the acting skill and the part itself, no, like, wow, I just said the guy's name. Matthew McConaughey was amazing. Like, if you didn't know it was Matthew McConaughey, you would have a hard time telling it was him. I mean, his mannerisms were very much different from his usual, all right. I mean, like, he lost a lot of weight for it. You can tell he's kind of like almost at the machinist level. His behaviors and his mannerisms, his like, this is, he became a different person for this role, and that's a sign of amazing acting. Jared Leto put on a wig and wore makeup and then talked with a lisp. And I was like, that's acting? Okay. That's, I don't know why this is, like, you could say, it's like, it was alright, but as far as I could tell, there wasn't anything this wasn't like, wow, this is mind-blowing, did not expect that from Jared Leto. It was like, that seemed like a very meh role. I don't know why it was touted as this awesome breakout performance and all that sort of thing. It's like the only thing that was is just because they're like, oh, we've got a transgender person or a transvestite person on screen. And I'm like, well, when you're dealing with the AIDS epidemic, which is what Dallas Buyers Club is dealing with, and there's a whole lot of people who were gay and bisexual that were spreading this around, it seemed to be mostly impacting those communities, which the film does address, because when he first gets it, he keeps saying, "Oh, but I'm not one of them. There's no way I could have it." And it's like, there's other ways of getting the disease besides, sodomy, but sodomy is the main way that particular disease is spread. That particular virus, so HIV, that becomes the disease of AIDS. So yeah, he kept saying, it was like, but it was well known this is primarily a condition that impacts homosexuals and bisexuals and people who are promiscuous and sleeping around with other people who have had AIDS, and drug users. And in this film, the main character was a drug user, and that's how they contracted it. And that's not a big reveal. That's all. This is all stuff in the first few minutes of the film. That's not even the entirety of Act 1. And it's like that's the intro to the film. That's probably what was in the trailers for it. I don't remember seeing the trailers, but that's not any big plot reveal. But I thought it was an excellent movie. It was very well done overall. I can see why it won awards and why McConaughey got awards. Again, I don't know why Leto got anything out of it, because it's like meh. I guess maybe it was a slow year and nobody else was a very good supporting actor that year, or no, it was probably more just like, yay, this person is pretending to be gay and transgender and wearing a dress and makeup, yay, awards for being so brave. And I was like, I don't remember, what's his name, Jack, who was in that, the Some Like It Hot, where it was, Marilyn Monroe and Jack Lemmon and I forget who the other guy was, where they were hiding out as women and dressed in drag. And I don't remember Tom Hanks getting any awards for Bosom Buddies, where his character, basically it was him. He was living in a apartment that was supposed to be only for women, and so then him and the other guy dressed up as women when they were in the apartments, and then they went back to their being dudes for work and everything outside of the apartment. I don't remember that being touted as this, awards and all this sort of things. Like, they're doing the same thing Jared Leto, and they were better actors in those other. And it's like, Jared Leto is kind of he's all right, an actor. I don't know of any role that I was like, wow, that was impressive, or that was, I completely did not even realize that was Jared Leto. It was so different from how Jared Leto normally is. And I'm like, this was a little sidestep for him. For McConaughey, it was almost a complete different transition from what he normally plays. Especially considering this was after Magic Mike or something like that, where he was completely ripped because he was playing a stripper, and then you see him in this, and he's gaunt and all like a hollow. It's like, dude, yeah, the toll he put on himself just to make this more accurate and believable, that's insane. That's dedication. What Jared Leto did was just kind of mediocre in comparison. All right, enough raging about that, but
because I'm going to be spoiling some key plot points. Feel free to subscribe and hit that bell icon while we wait.
Like you said,
in 1985, Ron Woodruff was diagnosed not just with HIV, but full-blown AIDS. At the time, HIV and
unfortunately, it wasn't delivered by a barbershop quartet singing about he's got full-blown AIDS.
AIDS were not well understood by the American public. Most people considered it a gay disease and didn't think it was a problem even worthy of serious attention. Thanks to a deadly combination of ignorance, anti-gay sentiment, and the novelty of the disease itself, drugs that could treat HIV were barely available anywhere. AIDS was spreading rapidly, with nothing to stop it or help those who got it. When Ron got the news, his prognosis wasn't good. He had just 30 days left to live. But there was a sliver of hope. Researchers at the National Cancer Institute had just proposed a breakthrough treatment for HIV using the antiretroviral drug azithromycin, or AZT. Unfortunately, in 1985, AZT was just starting FDA-required human trials. And while we all know that rigorous testing is super important, what most people don't realize is that the nature of the FDA process takes a really, really long time. And for most medical R&D companies, navigating the bureaucracy can cost over $1 billion per drug. So even fast-tracked, it would still take over 2 years for the AZT trials to be completed, and only then could it have been submitted for approval in the US.
Yeah. So I'm not sure why he's saying that's kind of spoilerish, because again, this is all stuff that happens, like this is the setup to the film. So I'm going to talk about that specifically, because the trials that they had to do were double blind, where the people administering the drug don't know if they're administering the real drug or the placebo, and the people receiving it don't know if they're getting a placebo or the real drug. That means people with this condition had to take this medication and not much else or nothing else to avoid skewing the results, and that means half of the people went there for treatment for a deadly condition and were instead given sugar pills. That is absolutely insane. And I know the double-blind study is kind of like the pinnacle when you're talking about proving whether something works or not. But for a deadly condition like this, that does not... It's so bizarre to me that that's the only method that can be implemented, or that would be... Like, oh, that's the only method that's allowable, is, oh, we gotta have this double-blind study in 2 years, and in the meanwhile, people are dying. That is absolutely absurd, because at this point, you would think, okay, even if it doesn't help, let me do anything. And that's the situation this Ron Woodruff, I think that's his last name, that's what he found himself in, and throughout the film, he is taking anything and everything that he thinks might help, because it's being prescribed in other countries, or it's being prescribed here or there, or it's being recommended by this group or that group, and they're the main thing that the film, and so I don't think I'm going to play the whole clip from FEE, I think I'm going to actually end it here, but the main takeaway from the film, although I think FEE doesn't quite push on this as hard, was that all the people that he was helping, or was, giving medicine to and all that sort of stuff, they were taking whatever got them results. Whether it was a placebo effect, or whether it was, maybe it was they were spending money and it wasn't really helping, but they were taking all sorts of things, and they were staying alive. And now, yeah, so this is going to be spoilerish, so if you don't want the film spoiled, again, just like what FEE said. So the rest of this, everything I've said to this point, I don't think is very spoilerish. That's all stuff that's very early on in the film, and not, but I am going to spoil kind of the takeaway from the entire film, although the film is still a really well-made film. The acting is superb on Matthew McConaughey's part. Jennifer Garner is kind of forgettable. Most of the other people are pretty forgettable. Like the doctor he meets in Mexico was I don't remember seeing that guy in other stuff, but I think he did a good job. There's a couple actors and actresses who were like, no, that was believable. That was kind of unexpected sort of stuff, but for the most part, it was all on McConaughey, and he carried the film. It's a really well-made film. An excellent point, but the big takeaway was that he was, and this is what happened in real life, he was given 30 days to live. He was told that within 30 days he would die, and he did start taking that particular medicine, and wasn't getting better, ended up going to a hospital in Mexico, and the doctor there prescribed him a bunch of other stuff, took him off of that, put him on something else, and he started to improve, and his condition started to improve, and then he goes and takes that to other people and starts giving them, and he's taking whatever, and they were checking with the results they were seeing in people, whether people were living longer, whether people were... and in the end, this Ron Woodruff person, he lived for 7 years after he was given the prognosis that he would die in 30 days. Now, had he stuck with what the FDA was mandating, or was claiming, I was like, oh, yep, this is the way you have to do it, he would have died within that 30 days or within that first year. But because he was like, no, I'm going to ignore you guys, I'm going to do whatever is going to make me feel better, help me deal with the symptoms. It may not prevent the disease or anything like that, but I'm going to do everything I need to survive. And in the meantime, you guys are working on that cure and all of that. Now, as far as I can tell, there is nothing that would... Had the people that were getting the sugar pills and all that sort of stuff, had they been able to get the same kind of... these other drugs that were not necessarily drugs, a lot of times it was just like vitamin supplements and you know, things like that to help keep their immune system up, to help them keep healthy and all that sort of stuff so they could deal with the symptoms. Had the people in the study been able to take that sort of stuff, so that way even if they're getting the sugar pills and all that sort of stuff, they could still continue to live for much longer than otherwise would be possible, and maybe live long enough for the cure to actually be proven in the double-blind study. But no, that's not what happened. And in real life, thousands of people died because of the way that this had to go. And I'm glad now that we're seeing things open up a little bit more as the, you know, if you're terminal, try, right? The free to try, or is, what's the right, not right to trial, what's the phrase that's used? I think it's free to try, but yeah, if you are terminal, do whatever you think is going to help you not die. Provided that's not killing somebody else and taking their blood or something like that. But any type of medicine that's, you know, it's, you know, in the works, or, you know, it's not untested, all that, you're free to take that. You can take that, and whether it works or not, you have that choice to take whatever you think might prolong your life or might cure your condition. All right. So, moving on from that, this is the worst ice cream ad ever. And it is COVID related, so this is all kind of, the running theme is, again, COVID, but I'm just going to go ahead and play this because we are already at 8 o'clock. All right.
Out of that $350 billion fund to help small businesses and its workers get through the shutdown.
It will be up to Congress to restock it.
But Democrats blocking that move this morning.
They asked for $250 billion in 48 hours. I said, well, I don't think so. They objected, and I congratulate the Senate Democrats.
Speaker Pelosi, what are you going to share with us from your home?
Chocolate candy.
Thousands have been forced to wait for hours at food banks all across the country.
This is
Oh my.
chocolate, and then we have some other chocolate here. We just got to restock the ice cream.
You don't want to eat up everything all at one time.
I can't do it much longer. I'm trying so hard.
We were, shall we say, enjoying.
Having to admit that, yeah, we're starving, and
I like it better than anything else.
Taping this segment, there are 22 million people out of work.
This specific program is about stopping job losses today.
This is hurting people bad.
Other people in our family look for some other flavors, but
Right now, it's survival move. You don't know where that next something else is going to come from.
I don't know what I would have done if ice cream were not invented. I just wonder.
Yeah, so not really an advertising for ice cream, and this is brilliant. A brilliant ad by Donald Trump's campaign, and then the quote at the end here: "Let them eat ice cream, Nancy Antoinette," referencing Marie Antoinette. Although Marie Antoinette never actually said "let them eat cake," but that was kind of the the sentiment of the nobility at the time. Is you know, give the peasants whatever will pacify them, and just, you know, give them kind of temporary fleeting things when the, you know, while they were being fleeced for all their money and while their economy was in the toilet, while, you know, the people were suffering, but the nobility didn't care about the plight of the lower classes. They were like, yeah, just give them something temporary to placate them. Give them some, you know, it's similar to the situation in Rome where, you know, the country was at war, their economy was in the toilet, and what do? They up the Colosseums, they up the gladiator fights, the, you know, they placated the people by appealing to the entertainment. And they're like, yeah, don't worry about all the rest of this stuff. Don't worry about how you're going to feed your family. Instead, we're gonna have all of these events planned, and you just watch that and shut up about the plights that are plaguing you on a daily basis. And that's kind of a similar mentality that Marie Antoinette, and this is the same mentality being exhibited here by Nancy Pelosi, because she's not impacted by what's going on. She doesn't see the impact, like the results, and like that is bizarre. Like in the I don't know what's going on there. I mean, she was on a late night host or whatever and at the show, and for some reason decides it's an important opportunity to be like, hey, I'm just like everybody else. I've got an entire fridge or freezer dedicated to ice cream. She had two what looked like industrial size refrigerators in that clip side by side, and I'm like, most people don't even have one that is half that size. And they're trying to stock up all their stuff, and they showed clips of other people like putting all their stuff, and like, yeah, that's all they have, and they're not, splurging on basically luxury items, which ice cream would be. It's kind of like this, it's a dessert or whatever, it's a treat. It's not what people are spending their money on right now, and yet Pelosi's just, we just restocked our fridge with ice cream because we're, this current economic situation and current quarantine is not hurting us in the least, is the message that's being sent, which is such a bizarre tone, or such a bizarre thing to express in this time when people are starving and they're going to food banks. I think there's a little more, wait, maybe that wasn't the rest of this clip. I think that was actually, I think that was the other video I watched where this was included, but not, I'm not going to try to find that clip now and go back to it, but there are people who don't normally go to food banks who are going to food banks now because they are out of money. They can't go to the grocery store and buy food. There are grocery stores and convenience stores that are stocked with food, and these people, they're out of money. And even with the stimulus package and all that sort of stuff, they're going to food banks and those food banks are going to run out of reserve. In the meantime, she's stocking up on frozen desserts. And it's such a tone-deaf display. Yeah, she is pretty monstrous, considering she was one of the people that held up. So even though I don't agree with the financial stimulus, the people who are out of money and are going to food banks, they're going to see a benefit from that money right now. Although they're going to see a detriment later on once that, the inflation catches up and the prices of goods and services, and once they do go back to work, they're going to see the cost of goods go up, and it's going to hurt them in the long run for that temporary being able to buy food and stuff again. But Nancy Pelosi, despite is sitting in this this mansion, having two refrigerators, one stocked with tons of ice cream in that bottom freezer there, was holding up the bill along with other Democrats because they wanted diversity quotas and some other nonsense like that, and a Green New Deal type stuff in the spending bill. And it's like, I don't agree with the spending bill, but if people need money right now and they're starving because you put them out of work by this shutdown, then give them the money and don't put all this other stupid nonsense in there. But they did that anyway, so then they took a bad situation and made it worse. Alright. So tying all this together, so all this stuff was COVID related in the because that's what we're currently experiencing right now. And like I was saying, it's like the choice was forced upon Trump. Now in the movie Sophie's Choice, she's in the Nazi concentration camps when she makes this choice. And usually, a parent doesn't have to choose between their two children. But instead, it is evil leftists that force that choice upon her in the film. And right now, it's these evil leftists that have forced this choice upon Trump to choose between quarantining and harming the economy, or choosing the economy and what he thought, in his opinion, was letting people die by the millions. He was forced in that situation by these evil leftists, these radical crazies, the same people who say that climate change is going to kill us if we don't do something within the next 10 or so years. And it's like, these are the same people who are wrong all the time. But for some reason, in this example, or in this situation, those cries took hold with the public. And the public and other politicians and other experts on this all seem to be saying the same thing, that this is going to be so devastating that Trump had to do something. And he made that choice. But, and this is kind of a little, kind of really odd coincidence, I guess, or a little kind of happy coincidence, I should say. So I was on Blue Politics last week or so, and I don't remember, but somebody started talking about favorite TV shows and stuff like that, and 2 shows were recommended to me. One was The Wire, and the other was The Good Place. And they were talking about comedies. Like, I think somebody mentioned Friend, and somebody mentioned Seinfeld, and one lady on there mentioned The Good Place, and I'd heard a couple things about The Good Place, but I was just kind of meh. It doesn't seem all as like it wasn't high on my priority list, but when this person recommended it, I was like, and she mentioned other things like The Office and Parks and Recreation, and at the end she said, but if I had to pick just one, I'd pick The Good Place. And I was like, well, that's an interesting statement, because I'd heard The Good Place was worth watching, but saying it's better than Parks and Recreation or The Office or Seinfeld, I was like, those are kind of shows that are considered all-time classics. Now, Friends, I wouldn't consider in the same ballpark as the rest of those shows. Friends was a successful show, but meh. I mean, it's not like top-tier comedy. Like, if I'm thinking of, like, the funniest shows on television, I'm thinking, okay, Seinfeld comes to mind. It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia comes to mind. South Park comes to mind. Key and Peele comes to mind. Like, those are like top-tier. You will laugh every episode you watch. There's always something that makes you just uncontrollable laughter sort of thing. Like Friends, you can watch entire seasons and be like, meh. There might be 1 or 2 good jokes in there, and that's it. Now, so if somebody's saying this is like Parks and Recreation and The Office also, I should include in there with the others that I mentioned, because yeah, there's episodes in there that are just, especially the Andy stuff. He's got that one. So let's relate this back to the COVID thing. There's one where people in the office are getting sick, and this is the best joke in the entire season. So if you haven't seen it, or the entire series, this is my favorite joke from the entire series. If you haven't seen it, ignore what I'm about to say and go watch the series. But the main character is sick, and Chris Pratt, who plays this character named Andy, who's an absolute moron, is typing on the computer, and he says, Leslie, I just looked up your symptoms on the computer, and it says you have internet connection problems. This is the best joke in the entire series. It was, oh man, it is brilliant. And the rest of the show is really funny. And The Good Place, I didn't think would hold up to that same kind of standard. But so The Good Place, one of the creators of The Good Place is somebody who, the co-creator of Parks and Recreation. So he's the main showrunner and all that sort of thing. But The Good Place is a little different from what most sitcom type shows are about. Because The Good Place is a show. Let me just play the ad here for it, and then I'll talk a little bit more about it.
You, Eleanor Shellstrop, are dead.
Cool. How did I die?
Are you sure you want to hear? You were struck by a truck advertising an erectile dysfunction pill called Engorgulate. Funnily enough, the first EMT to arrive was an ex-boyfriend of yours.
Okay, I get it. Thank you.
You're okay, Eleanor. You're in the good place. You are here because you got innocent people off death row.
You are my soulmate.
Cool. Bring it in, man. You'll stand by my side no matter what, right?
Of course I will.
I wasn't a lawyer. There's been a big mistake. I'm not supposed to be here.
Wait, what? Are you sure this isn't you?
They got my name right, but nothing else. Somebody royally forked up. Why can't I say fork?
If you're trying to curse, you can't hear.
That's bullshit.
Tell me one good thing that you did on Earth.
Do you have a second to talk about the environment?
Do you have a second to eat my farts?
Oh.
I can't risk going to the bad place.
Okay, well, maybe it's not all that bad. We'll ask Janet. Hey, Janet?
Hi there. How can I help you?
What is the bad place like?
I can only play you a brief audio clip of what is happening there right now.
Well, it doesn't sound awesome.
Hello. Can I just say, I love your house. It's just so teensy.
So I'm gonna pause the ad. And so here's my problem with this ad, because this ad is all taken from the very first episode, like the pilot episode of the show. And a lot of these jokes are very meh. I mean, there's a couple in there you're like, ha ha ha, you might get a little, but these are not like gut buster, laugh out loud moments. Like, so this is not like with the Office with the parkour cold open and stuff like that. This is very middle of the road funny. Not, it's like some of this is even just kind of groan or cringeworthy. And so that's the ad that I had seen for The Good Place, and I'm like, this person is putting this up there with kind of the top tier comedies. I don't see that coming. It's like the premise is really interesting, and it's not your typical sitcom premise, so it's got that going for it. So what I will say is the first season, I didn't find myself laughing a lot. I mean, there was the things that were like, haha, that's kind of clever, but I didn't audibly laugh when watching the show. There was a couple, but I thought it was a very interesting show, and the core concept is she's trying to be a better person. And this is kind of very reminiscent of My Name is Earl. Now, I liked My Name is Earl as a TV show, and My Name is Earl did have laugh out loud moments, but most of the show was just really good because it was about him being a terrible person in his old life, and now he's trying to improve. And I was like, this is very reminiscent of The Good Place, is that she was a terrible person when she was alive on Earth, and now she's trying to make up for all those flaws and become a better person. A very similar-ish concept. So I actually thought maybe the creator of this might have been behind My Name is Earl, but completely different guy. But this does a much better job. So in My Name is Earl, it was all just karma. Like, hey, you do bad things and bad things happen to you. So if you do good things will happen to you, sort of thing. And that's the main throughway, which is a very, very kindergarten view of philosophy and morals. The Good Place does an excellent job of every episode is focused on a different philosophical concept. And while they scratch the surface and sometimes they gloss over what the actual concept is and kind of make it a little more generic and broad-based, but if you're talking about a TV show that's supposed to appeal to a lot of people, you can't go too deep with it. But the fact that they structure every episode around a actual philosophical concept, and all of the story arcs and all of the comedy is based around kind of illustrating the concept at play. So the first season, I was hooked, and I was like, this is a really good show. Some parts of it are kind of reminiscent, or reminded me of Eureka, which is a show that I liked a lot too, because it's kind of, because they're in heaven, it's not just the, hey, be good to be good, like My Name is Earl, but it's someone like every episode, there's also some new thing that heaven allows people to do that they couldn't do on Earth. There's some kind of like, hey, this is really cool, or this is unique, or this is, and that kind of reminded me of Eureka, which Eureka was kind of a comedy slash sci-fi-ish show, and this kind of is like merging the best parts of My Name is Earl and the best parts of Eureka and the best parts of Parks and Recreation into one show. And like I said, the first season is mostly build-up. And I'm not going to give away any spoilers or anything like that. First season is pretty much, it's set is a very similar to The Office, because if I remember correctly, the first season of The Office, I mean, there was a couple of jokes, but I didn't find myself laughing all that much. But later seasons, it got funnier and funnier, and then there were throwbacks to stuff in the first season, and they didn't land the first time. But you get to season 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, and jokes that didn't do well the first time around, whatever, they're making the exact same joke or a very similar joke, and you are laughing and you cannot breathe because you're laughing so hard. And so it's funny on its own, but it's funnier because it's referencing something previously. And so those jokes build as the show goes on, and that's what The Good Place is doing. The first season, it's a really quality show. I like all the actors. It's very it's very, very well done. The CG is a little wonky, similar to Eureka, but I mean, it's a TV show, so what you're not gonna expect, you're not gonna expect Marvel quality CGI and stuff like that. But the first season has a couple of laughs, but I like, after watching the first season, I was like, well, that was a really good show. I don't know if that would put that up there with Parks and Recreations and stuff like that. Season 2 is where I lost it. The trolley episode. So far, there's only 3 seasons of the show, but the episode where they talk about the trolley problem, like, I thought I was going to hurt myself because I was laughing so hard. And the most amazing part of that is, while the trolley problem is the philosophical core of the episode, as far as like the heart and the emotion of it, it's also like most of the humor is all about that trolley problem, and it was so unexpected, and it's absolutely genius. Like that, I think that episode is my favorite episode of the whole series so far, is the one where they're dealing with the trolley problem. And I'm like, dude, that whole thing from start to finish, I was laughing hysterically, and it was so good at dealing with this moral. And then, yeah, so season 2 of the 3 is my favorite of the show so far. Season 3, but again, it's, also, like, really good. I found myself laughing out loud more, like every episode I was, there was that one moment where I had to stop. But in the trolley problem, it was the last episode I watched before I went to bed. So I started the episode before I went, so it's that trolley problem. Like, the first intro before the opening screen, there is this joke. I must have laughed for like 3 minutes, and I paused the show, and I'm like, okay, I've got to go to bed. I don't have time to finish another episode. But I went to bed laughing about it, and I woke up, and I was still laughing about it and thinking about it. And I was like, dude, that is amazing what they did there. So I'm probably building it up too much, but yeah, it's like that whole episode through and through. I think I want to go back and watch that again. Just that one episode. I mean, probably go back and watch the whole season again, or the whole show again at some point in time. But I mean, I just watched it last week or whatever, over the last 2 weeks, I should say. But it is a really excellent show, very, very funny, and it is not. So there is some slapstick funny, which I think the first season relied a little too much on, and a little too much on the you can't curse, and so replacing ha ha ha, stuff like that. So first season, I think, relied a little too much on that. Season 2 was a mix of everything. So there's slapstick stuff, there's, callback jokes there, but there's really, really well thought out. But I don't think those jokes would have landed had they tried them in Season 1. And I think the reason those jokes land is because Season 1 does such an excellent job of building all of that foundational work. And without Season 1... And so, yeah, they may have been a little more story, a little more dramatic, situations and stuff like that, a little more, anxiety type stuff. But without that, Season 2 and Season 3 would not have the same impact. And so I think that the showrunners on this do an excellent job. And this definitely goes up there with top comedies all time. And so... even though this is only 3 seasons, this is up there for me with It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and I know I'm probably in the minority on this, but I think It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia is funnier than almost any other show out there, including Parks and Recs and The Office and Seinfeld. Like, if I had one like the all-time comedy, because there's so much just insanity and garbage people of the Always the Always Sunny crew, just how ridiculous everything they do is. That to me is probably the best comedy of all time. I think this, because it is more relying on cerebral rather than just outrage and absurdity. There's outrage and absurdity, but there's so much that is very well crafted. I think this kind of edges out and is my new favorite comedy. We'll see how season 4 goes and all that sort of thing. This show is still going, so we'll see if they can keep it and wrap it up kind of succinctly and nicely. But as of now, the first 3 seasons, high recommendation from me. It's a little slow rolling, but once it gets going, it is again, still really well written, really great premise that they continue to make and improve upon, and the jokes get better as it goes. So the first episode is a little meh. I mean, all these clips from the promo is from the first episode, but everything after that, man, I really got to take a lead. I'm kind of squirming in my seat, but before I do that, I'm going to kind of wrap this up. And so I think Trump was kind of forced in a situation where he needed to make a choice. I don't think that was a legitimate choice. I think it was a misframed situation built on hysteria and fear-mongering, projections and models, all based on misinformation. And when you're given that misinformation, I find it really hard to blame a person for making what they think is the only choice that is the lesser of two evils, because they're so pinned in. And it seems like that's where Trump was in this situation. And I think given that circumstance and where he only saw the 2 options and had to pick the 2, I think he chose correctly. But had he known what I know, and had he there's some point, because early on he was making claims very similar to the ones I've held pretty consistent the whole time to, but eventually he kind of folded a little bit. And so I'm thinking if he had the stones to keep going with that and be like, no, you guys are full of it, you guys are wrong, you're always wrong, I'm not gonna, I'm gonna take the risk, and that you guys are wrong, and I'm gonna keep doing what we're doing. I'm gonna, we're gonna tell people, the ban from China was a good step. That's not something that's gonna cripple the economy, and that's something that was appropriate. But the whole every state lockdown sort of thing, that's where it went overboard. And again, that's where you see him kind of bowing down and being like, oh, yep, we're taking every precaution, we're doing everything because we got to stop the 2 million deaths sort of thing. Had he stuck to his original guns and, had balls of steel instead of squashy grapes or whatever, he would have stuck with that, and I think the entire country would be better off now because of it, and he would be doing better in the polls, and the Democrats wouldn't have anything to stand on, because what we're seeing now is they were wrong about everything, as usual. And I don't know why Trump fell for it and thought they might be right this time. Alright, so that's all I gotta say on that, and I'm gonna end with this little clip. So if you're not familiar with League of Legends, sorry, but I played League of Legends quite a bit, and very familiar with this genre. And this guy started making videos a couple of months ago, and his channel has been blowing up. But these are pretty entertaining. This is some of the, even if you're not familiar with League of Legends, this stuff is pretty golden as far as comedy goes.
Back at lane and I run up to knock over this tower when Thor's wife french fries me and tries to solar eclipse my tight ass, but I Baywatch jog out of the blast radius. I go hyperbolemic and puke fiery gumballs onto the rabbit and take her down, then triumph procs to perk up these titties as I tell the stun slut to pack her bags. checking in on Timo and it looks like he's satisfied with the results from his first 6 attempts at standing still and attacking Miss Octopus Fetish, so he sticks to his strategy to stay consistent. Another quick update, and it looks like the speedy hamster is about to get his first kill, but it turns out he forgot to read the patch notes from October 2010 when Riot added turrets into the game and falls victim to not understanding what they do.
Okay. Dude, that is awesome. Yeah, and if you ever play League of Legends, you know, it's like every other match you get somebody like that on your team, and it's like, are you serious? How did you think that was going to go well for you? But yeah, it's pretty brilliant. Hasn't read the patch notes from 2010 where they introduced towers. Because yeah, that's been pretty much a part of the game since it was introduced. So how do you not understand? Yeah, duh. But yeah, those people are always on there. And so this guy is called Rav. His content is hilarious. He does, and it's even better because it's got that speak and spell voiceover for that delivering the jokes, and it's just that deadpan. Yeah, and it just very 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 good. Highly recommend his channel. Although he probably only does 1 or 2 videos a week or something like that, maybe one a week. So not a whole lot of videos so far, but each one of them has got you'll find at least something in there to laugh at, especially if you've played this game. Alright, and on that note, I think I am done because my bladder's about to burst, and so I'm going to go ahead and end the stream, and thanks to anybody who did stick with me for this, and anybody who ends up watching this in the future, and I will try again to see you next Tuesday. Thanks for joining me.